Hey, what's going on, guys? It's Demetrious Johnson, and you're listening to MMALatestNews.com.
It's time to roll, baby.
Hello and welcome back to Split Decision on MMA Latest. My name is Jay Sweetnam. This is Mitch Ivy, and we have an absolutely dynamite show coming up for you today. We're going to be talking all about Joanna Jedrzejczyk's comprehensive victory over Michelle Waterson at Tampa Bay, and of course, Brock Lesnar, Cain Velasquez, the rematch in Saudi Arabia. Velasquez, he's done with the UFC. He switched over to the WWE. Is this a good move? Is this going to help his profile? We're going to talk all about it. But first things first, Mitch, how are you doing?
I've not been too bad. We've had a fantastic weekend of fights. We've had Bellator, PFL, UFC, and of course ONE FC had their 100th event over the weekend, so it's been a class weekend for fights.
Yeah, they absolutely did. We're sport for choice, really. I know Demetrious Johnson is now a champion over at ONE. How do you feel about this? Would you rather have him stayed over with the UFC, or are you happy he's made the move?
He pretty much achieved all he could in the UFC. He was one of the most underrated fighters in the division and the organisation. He absolutely wiped out that flyweight division until he came up against Cejudo the second time. And he's done brilliantly to go into ONE FC. You know, Eddie Alvarez hasn't quite managed to crack that side of the world, and he's just gone in there and taken the title.
Yeah, I'm going to slightly disagree somewhat. I know he did a lot in the UFC, and I know he's doing a lot over in ONE. You said he was one of the most underrated fighters of all time. I actually have Demetrious Johnson down as one of the most overrated fighters of all time. I think he absolutely blitzed the division full of people who weren't as talented as some of the other divisions. I felt he ducked challenges when he could have fought TJ Dillashaw, and Henry Cejudo came along, and I know Cejudo beat him, but a lot of people just saw that as a foregone conclusion going in. Do you think Demetrious could have enhanced his legacy had he have taken more risks?
You say he's overrated for not challenging other champions. Is John Jones overrated for not moving up to heavyweight?
No, but if you look at John's resume, he's got the likes of Daniel Cormier on there. I don't think Demetrious Johnson has those huge names.
No, but he's fought who he's had in his division. I think, did he fight Benavidez? He's fought Cejudo. He beat him originally.
Yeah, as I said, though, limited opponents. Cejudo wasn't overly experienced the first time they fought. Benavidez, good fighter, but that challenge was there against TJ Dillashaw. He chose not to take it. And what you say about John Jones, I agree to a certain extent, but he does have that name on his resume in Daniel Cormier, somebody who is amongst the greatest fighters of all time. He blitzed the likes of, Vitor Belfort, Lyoto Machida, Chelson. He has got so many world-level names on that resume, and now I am desperate to see him go up to heavyweight because he needs to challenge himself up there. If he really wants to go down as the greatest, I think he needs a Stipe Miocic, because there's people coming through, the likes of Israel Adesanya, who are willing to take on the very best. We saw that, this weekend just gone, 2 weeks ago against Australia when he took on Robert Whittaker. So I think John Jones does need to do stuff like that. But we're moving over to another heavyweight. Let's talk all about it. It's Cain Velasquez, and Brock Lesnar was terrified as he saw the Mexican man who defeated him in such destructive fashion all those years ago. They're now doing it back in WWE. What do you think about this?
It's absolutely crazy, isn't it? The way that Cain just walked his way into the WWE. Now he's retired from MMA as of this week, and it's going to be really enjoyable. I'm glad that they're using the UFC. That their history that they've got as part of the storyline. I think it's important that they didn't just sort of pretend it never happened, and I think they've done it very well. And it'd be interesting to see how long this storyline goes on for.
Well, I think it can go on for a fair while. I know Cain has actually signed a deal now with the WWE, so he's going to be there for several years. Obviously, he's got that link with Rey Mysterio, the whole Mexican heritage. This rivalry with Brock Lesnar could go on and on. We know what WWE are like. There's disqualifications. There's people getting kited out. They can sort of make these rivalries, they milk them to absolute death, can't they? You can see two people fight each other over and over again for an enhanced period of time, and people will keep paying, $60 out in America for the pay-per-view.
Yeah,
so
crazy.
it might go on for a while.
It could do, and of course, Cain Velasquez is very good friends with Daniel Cormier, who does have his heat with Brock Lesnar. He's a big WWE fan himself. Could we potentially see him at WrestleMania with either Cain or against Lesnar himself?
Are you thinking what I'm thinking? Dudley Boys, tag team, Cormier, Velasquez. That's what I want. Could you imagine those two together, tagging each other in? Cormier with the slams, Velasquez double-legged people. You know what I mean? I think these two could be a real comical pair.
It'd be interesting. Of course, we've got Rey Mysterio almost doing the talking to Cain at the moment. It's almost like a younger brother stepping in for his older brother.
Yeah,
and interesting.
We know that Rey Mysterio is the biggest little man in the WWE. I don't want to go too hardcore WWE in this chat.
No, definitely not.
What I'm saying is I think this is a good move for Cain Velasquez. He's got so many injuries that have kept him out of MMA for such a long period of time. He had ages out after he lost the title. Then he fought Travis Brown, had another few years out, came back, was beaten by Francis Ngannou in a few, not a very long period of time. And yes, I know he went down off a punch, but his knee snapped in half as well. And that's something that's just been so prolific in his career. These injuries. So I'm glad that he's over in WWE in one aspect, but in another, I mean, they get injuries over there as well. It's not an easy sport to get into.
It's almost a more brutal sport in terms of what they put their bodies through, and they're on the road 24/7 pretty much. So it's going to be interesting now watching the videos from his luchador days and what he's been doing, Hurricanranas and all that. That from seeing that from a heavyweight and a person who's had so many injuries is quite outstanding.
It's mental. He'll be doing that night in, night out. I'm sure Mysterio will be teaching in the 619. When Cormier comes in, those two will be getting up to know. Could you imagine Cormier like swan-tomming bombing people from the top rope?
That'd be mental. That's a mental image. And now he's still got Stipe Miocic to fight. But
in fact, Stipe Miocic will be the ultimate good guy WWE, like the old school Hulk Hogan of eat your vegetables and all that. Coming in as the fireman, Stipe Miocic. And then John Jones might be a bit too over the top, but could you imagine him like crashing his car into like the WWE divas?
Well, it's interesting. We've had Ronda Rousey, we've got Brock Lesnar coming over from the UFC, Cain Velasquez. There's a number of names that could potentially just jump over to the organisation.
I mean, and another one of the actually. I just want to go a quick story. Do you know that Chael Sonnen was offered like $1 million contract with the WWE? And the offer was, don't rematch Anderson Silva, come over to us, and he chose not to take it.
Yeah, and if I'm correcting that story, he was told to bring one of the belts with him or something like that.
Yeah, the one that he bought off eBay,
yeah.
Michael Bisping fought
and
out, yeah.
it was going to be some big marketing now. Chael's probably the godfather of MMA at the moment.
Oh, absolutely. Could you remember, though, Chael Sonnen's trash talk back in the day? He was the original gangster, and his nickname says so. Anderson Silva, you absolutely suck. The stuff he said about Brazilian people. The worst line of all time in a press conference, in my opinion. Chael Sonnen, Tito Ortiz, and Tito makes a comment like, Chael Sonnen has only made so much money in his career by using his mouth. And Chael replies, the only person I know who made money using their mouth is your ex-wife, obviously referring to Jenna Jameson, Tito Ortiz's Polish star ex-wife. But either way, funny stuff for Chael.
Chael's a genius at what he does, and he's smart with it as well. He's not someone who uses too much foul language. He's very thoughtful in what he says. And that's a genius marketing tool to have, because it means he can't be sort of, can't be bleeped out or anything like that.
Yeah, he really was one of the best. And he'd have been perfect over there, but obviously he chose to fight Anderson Silva instead. Unfortunately, that didn't go too well for him. I mean, he was so close that first round. In fact, in terms of fighters I like who came so close, that still haunts me to this day when he got triangled by Anderson Silva. It was tragic, Mitch.
Yeah, Chael Sonnen he's up there with some of the most undeserved fighters to not win a belt so far. And he moved over to the Bellator. He was in that heavyweight Grand Prix, which was a good showing from him. But I'm glad he's retired now and he's making a killing off presenting authority for both Bellator and UFC. Tell me someone else who could potentially be on both organisations like that.
Oh, no, I think you're right, Mitch. I think he may well be the only one. And just to emphasise that tragic backstory that Chael Sonnen had, I mean, I know at Bellator he got to the semi-finals of the Grand Prix, came close, was agonisingly close against Anderson Silva. I know in WEC he beat the champion, but the champion missed weight, so he didn't get the belt, which was ridiculous in itself, because usually it's the other way around. If the champion misses weight, you can still win the belt. So I don't know why that happened, but Chael should have been a world champion over there. Yeah,
and I know one of his biggest regrets is not becoming champion. I remember a story about him promising his dad that he'd be a champion before he died.
Heartbreaking.
And, it's a real stomach sort of, it makes you want to well up really almost seeing that.
I remember when the day he did retire after he lost to Fedor, and a member of the press, I can't remember who it was, asked him, what would you say to your dad now? And he just welled up. And I think Chael Sonnen, with all the trash talk aside, you could tell just how good a human being he is. I really like Chael Sonnen.
Yeah, I think everyone does. It's really, really, difficult to dislike Chael Sonnen, really. He speaks a good game, his knowledge inside and out, and everyone seems to like him through the UFC. Maybe not some of the Brazilians that he's had trash talking with.
Well, he said Brazilians play in the mud, which is racial in some ways, but we'll move on from that.
Yes.
But yeah, Chael's done a lot of good for the sport, I think, and he would have been perfect over in the WWE. But I'm glad he stayed over because he was an absolute servant to mixed martial arts. And I obviously, I'm not a fan when, people use performance-enhancing drugs, but at least he was honest about it, and we don't see that from many people. Chael Sonnen, owned up to his mistakes, and I think that says a lot about his character.
It does, and he's not cheating, he's not trying in a sense, and everyone in that.
I don't think Michael Bisping would agree.
I know, his that era, everyone was on the gear, other than probably Michael Bisping, who was clean. And, you see what's happened to him with that era as well. The likes of Belfort, Anderson Silva has also been accused of drugs. I don't know if it's been confirmed.
Anderson Silva, he tested positive twice, didn't he? He blamed it on Viagra the first time. I can't remember what his excuse was the second time. I can't count Anderson Silva's, extracurricular activities, but, he gets up to what he gets up to. In my opinion, probably an excuse. But I think I read a stat the other day that over 70% of professional athletes are on steroids. So if you are in the UFC, in the back of your head, there's a 7 out of 10 chance my opponent is taking something. Where do you think that puts you from a psychological state?
Well, you got to say, if you look at that top 10 rankings of each division, 7 people are on performance-enhancing drugs. That's a ridiculous amount.
I think it's like 1% that get caught as well. It's mental. You
only got to look at TJ Dillashaw. Look at what he's done. His career is pretty much in tatters now. He's got another year and a bit. We're not probably going to see him again. Now, with that bantamweight division, it's not too stacked, whereas he could probably walk in and, one fight and get a title shot.
Yeah, I thought the absolute cheek on TJ Dillashaw. I remember when he got beat by Henry Cejudo and he was complaining about the stoppage. Was it a little early? Maybe, but it also wasn't the worst stoppage I've ever seen. Henry Cejudo was just pushing him over, bullying, and it felt like it was only a matter of time till that fight got stopped. And then he has the nerve to go on the press conference and go, "Oh, Henry didn't beat me, whilst he was on performance-enhancing drugs and cheating." Definitely.
And to move on from that, one fight that should have been stopped this weekend was Thomas Gifford versus Mike Davis. Now, Tom Gifford took 96 shots to the head in a 13-minute fight.
That's mental. CTA is what it is, and that's how you get it. 96 shots. How did you find watching that, Mitch?
It was kind of brutal. It was sad in the end because he kept going back to his corner. They kept sending him back out there after being destroyed, really. Now, a lot of people had on the referee to stop the fight. Now, I don't remember a clear point to where the fight had stopped until it did get stopped. He brutally knocked him out after Gifford's chin finally gave way. But I put some onus on the corner to treat your fighters better. If you know they're getting beat, what's the point of really putting them out there to get more damage?
I agree. And in boxing, we see trainers throwing the towel all the time. It's not something we ever really see in UFC. I know Jason Perillo did it for BJ Penn, but do you think we need to see more of that?
Definitely. I think the corners definitely need to see some more responsibility. Now, of course, they're getting a paycheck, and of course, we've seen some absolute fights where you're going into round 3 losing and you get the knockout and you get the finish, but you really need to see someone take responsibility for their fighters.
Yeah. And let's touch on the main event a little bit. Joanna Jedrzejczyk, Michelle Waterson. We were all talking about this narrative last week of maybe an absolute super fight in Asia, Waterson versus Zhang. We're not going to get it. Joanna looked back to her best. Does she deserve the next title shot?
I think there's 2 people left. There's Tatiana Suarez and, of course, Joanna Jedrzejczyk. Now, I might just be persuaded to Joanna, considering she's a former champion. But I think whoever faces Zhang next has got a problem. Zhang could be a superstar. Now, we've seen the title change hands twice this year already in Andrade and now Zhang. And it's going to be interesting. Now, Joanna Jedrzejczyk broke her foot, I believe, in the 2nd or 3rd round. So it depends on how long she's going to be out, whether it's a 6 to 8 week recovery period for her. And, of course, Tatiana Suarez is still recovering from that neck injury. So it's dependent on who goes forward. Could Jessica Andrade more or less sneak her way back into a rematch?
Potentially, but, Jessica Andrade got beat so comprehensively last time out. I think you need to be looking at Joanna. And I think Tatiana deserves a shot. I think she's done nothing wrong since she's been in the UFC. A lot of people, I know Brendan Schaub speaks very highly of her. He says she's going to beat everybody. Can you see her doing that?
She's undefeated at the moment. I think she's 8-0 at the moment. She's got an incredible record, so wrestling's incredible as well, and I think she gives Zhang some problems. Joanna Jedrzejczyk would be a probably more stylistic, more interesting fight to watch, I think, with her Muay Thai background. It's going to be a lot more striking. Now, she did piece Michelle Waterson up pretty badly this weekend. She almost lost by a rear naked choke in the 3rd, but she recovered. She looked much better than she did against Rose Namajunas in that 1st fight and that 2nd fight. And it looks like we've seen the Boogie Women come back for good.
Yeah, a bit of a regeneration in the career of Joanna Jedrzejczyk. And somebody else who's regenerated somewhat. Do you like that segue?
Definitely.
Cub Swanson, back to winning ways. I think as fans, we all love Cub, don't we? And it's somewhat wrong that there isn't a Gracie at a high level of the UFC, but Cub Swanson, he's somebody we all adore. He's back to winning ways. Are we going to see one last run?
Well, he found himself outside the rankings, and it's pretty... there was quite a skill difference between Kron Gracie and Cub Swanson this weekend. Kron Gracie came out and said he believes he won that fight. Now, it was a unanimous decision at 30-27 for all 3 judges. And Cub Swanson, he came in with a good game plan and it worked for him, considering the jiu-jitsu background that Gracie has. And, of course, Cub Swanson came out pre-fight to say that he'd been kicked out of a lot of jiu-jitsu schools, and it happened that he didn't need that in the end. It was just a lot of body shots and some good striking, which Gracie just didn't really know how to defend.
Yeah, I suppose in the sport of mixed martial arts, so many people are absolutely perfect at one skill and then they try and learn all the others. We see so many jiu-jitsu experts fall in love with their boxing. I think in UFC you should stick to what you know.
Definitely, and one sort of person that became victim of that was Mackenzie Dern. Her striking was very poor against Amanda Ribas, and Ribas was able to, she was a lot quicker on the jab. She very quickly managed to get the side of that fight, and she pulled through the win. Now, Mackenzie Dern only came back 4 months after giving birth to her daughter, so it's like, is that too quick of a comeback for her? She should be sticking to her jiu-jitsu, really. As you say, she's a world champion at many levels. She's a black belt, as was Rivas going into the fight. Both cornered by their dad, actually, as well, which is pretty interesting. I can't imagine being a father watching your daughter in a cage fight, but that's pretty badass.
No idea. I mean, when I have a daughter, I don't know what I'm going to do, Mitch. I don't know if I'd be able to. I'm going to try and get it down the ballet route. I don't know if I'll be able to cope with her going into a cage and fighting. Although I think it is important for everybody to learn martial arts. So I hope when I eventually end up having children, Mitch, that they do go down that route to a certain extent. But I don't know if I'd be overly happy with my daughter being in a cage. I think it'd be awful as a father to watch. But James Vick. And, things just are going from bad to worse to even worse, just to an absolute nightmare from the man. He's got a lot of talent, and this week he was knocked out by an up kick, Mitch. Where does he go from here? He's surely coming to the end now.
A brutal up kick as well as that. It cleaned him out, and Herb Dean was, it was one that he didn't really see coming. James Vick actually started that fight off very well. He took it to the ground, and that was probably his biggest mistake. He had some good striking. There was a big height difference in there that was working to his favour. But everyone was thinking the weight cut was the reason why he wasn't winning fights at 155. He's moved up a weight division, and the same thing's happened again. So he's really got to think what's next for his career. Potentially move down to another organisation, perhaps. But after being knocked out 4 times, we've seen what Luke Rockhold's gone through. Vick's going through a very similar path right now.
Every time you get knocked out, you become that little bit more susceptible to getting knocked out the next time. I don't know if James Vick can turn this around. I can tell that he wants to. I can tell that he's still got all the determination in the world. But this guy was a Golden Gloves boxing champion. He looked like a good UFC prospect. He was the biggest lightweight I've ever seen. How on earth was he making 155? He's about 6'12", and I'm not even sure that's a real height. But
I think that's
7
foot. Yeah,
poor mathematics from me there. That's why I'm talking about MMA, and I'm not a mathematician, Mitch. But I don't think things are going particularly well for him. But something that's gone particularly well for one of our boys from Manchester's own, Brendan Lofton. He flew out to Vegas. He won in great fashion, very comfortable for him. He's going to go into the PFL tournament next year, and he can win it, can't he, Mitch?
He looked fantastic the other night. Now, I know he was very disappointed that he actually took it to a decision. He wanted to get him out in the first round, but I think it was Matt Waggy, I'm not quite sure the pronunciation of it. He came in there to fight, and Brendan just pieced him together, and it was a very solid fight. It was good to see him go 3 rounds. Now, of course, this is not the tournament yet. If he goes 3 rounds next year, he's not unfamiliar with a war, this guy. And it's admirable to see, but from a tournament perspective and from a fan perspective, and of course he's on the podcast, it's worrying to see him go through so many wars.
Yeah, that's what Brendan is, isn't he? He's just a complete warrior, and I think he'll be able to tell us all about the fight when he's back on the podcast, fighting out of Manchester with Steve Howson next week. But there's a date at Madison Square Garden for him. He's just fought at Mandalay Bay. He's about to fight in Madison Square Garden. The lad from Manchester's ticking off the most iconic venues in the world, and he's really living the dream, isn't he?
He is, and it's kind of ironic when we saw him on the Contender Series. He didn't get that contract, and everyone thought, where does he go from here? He really deserved that contract, but it seems like he's got a much bigger horizon on his shoulders with PFL now. He's fought at Vegas. He's going to MSG on New Year's Eve, which is fantastic. Can you imagine fighting at MSG on New Year's Eve?
Mental, Mitch. Absolutely mental. Personally, I don't know if my career will ever lead me to Madison Square Garden.
Not quite yet.
But, we're
on the way.
Got to keep working, Mitch. Got to keep working. Get those sessions in. But Brendan's done absolutely brilliantly. And I think now, even though he's not in the UFC, he's got to be one of the best mixed martial artists in the country.
He's definitely probably England's biggest fighter at the moment in terms of name and what he's doing so far in the sport. Darren Till's probably up there, but should he lose again, I put Brendan Loughnane up there. And, he's fighting at MSG this year, as we said. He's not even started the tournament, and he could be winning $1 million next year at MSG. Again, this time next year's New Year's Eve.
Imagine, though, if you go from getting, everybody knew he deserved a place in the UFC in the Contender Series, and I think it was a disgrace it wasn't given.
Also a 10-second takedown.
I mean, was that really the reason? Has something gone on behind the scenes? Because you're literally just saying don't do one of the biggest elements of the sport then if you go for a takedown with 10 seconds left. I mean, Nate Diaz went for a takedown with 10 seconds left of the Conor McGregor fight. Dan Henderson and Michael Bisping, I know Henderson went for a takedown in the last round, and that was an absolute war. Takedowns are just part of the sport, Mitch. But back onto what I was saying. Brendan, he's gone from this horrible moment of everything looking, bleak, and then a year down the line, he's a millionaire. What a story. We're making films about Brendan Loughnane.
That deserves a Netflix documentary right there, if anything. And we'll probably do one this time next year for the channel. That'd be absolutely beautiful to watch. And he deserves it. He deserves it. He's a good guy. And he's pioneering the way for British MMA at the moment.
And him and Steve can speak all about this stuff on the podcast, because Steve and Brendan have obviously known each other for years. But it's mental to think that Steve would have known him 10 years ago, before the UFC and all that sort of stuff, and where he's come from.
Definitely. He's got an amazing story for him, and I'm hoping he gets through that tournament and he comes out at the end with $1 million.
Absolutely, I couldn't agree more. Anyway, I know you want to talk a bit about Kayla Harrison, so I'll let you fire away.
Yes, well, PFL really impressed me this weekend. They told me what time to watch the fights.
That's all you need. Bellator don't, PFL do.
And they delivered. I was watching Brendan. Now, I didn't actually watch the Kayla Harrison fight. I fell asleep. UK fans will relate to that one. But she's absolutely fantastic. She's remained undefeated so far. And she's going into the lightweight. They've got a lightweight division for the women in PFL, which is incredible. And she's going into the final of that now. Sarah Klossman was highly touted to be her opponent, but she actually lost that via decision, I believe it was. So that was a bit of an upset, and it's Kayla Harrison's probably, next to Cyborg, probably one of the biggest names going into 2020.
Yeah, probably. I would agree with you. And something we need to talk about, I know that you've just stressed a little bit there, you hinted at it just, about the problems that Bellator have had.
Yes.
And keeping up with Bellator is like trying to catch Sonic the Hedgehog in a marathon. Just absolutely impossible to do. You've got about 27 different channels that you need to click on. It's so disjointed. The broadcast is telling you that something's the main event, but then you need to switch over for a different main event. So confusing. Why, Mitch? Why is it so confusing? This doesn't need to be this way.
I think Bellator has got the live aspect nailed down. The fact that they went from a kickboxing ring to an octagon, well, not an octagon, but a cage for Bellator. But they need to work out their production side. The fact that their pay-per-views are getting taped and released at 2 a.m. on a Sunday on Sky Sports, and then they've got the European series on at 10 p.m. on Channel 5. It's really difficult to see now. Kane Mustafa, who's also been on the podcast this weekend, and he was supposed to be on TV at 10 p.m. BST, and when I clicked on, he wasn't there. He'd already fought.
All over the place, isn't it? It's just to say, it's just absolutely impossible to keep up with Bellator. You're watching the fights 1 minute, Peppa Pig's on the next. I mean, there's only so much time I can spend watching Peppa Pig and thinking, where are the fights? It's just all over the place, and this is something that Bellator need to sort out, because it's absolutely pointless. And it took them about 105 years just to get a deal with Sky.
Yes, definitely. They need to make sure, I don't know what their plan is going into 2020, but they need to make sure every event is live. They have some great fighters on there. They have some great talent on there, and they need to be shown and really, really shown this limelight. If you're there as a live event, I know Kuwait, who is on the channel, was down in Milan, and he absolutely loved it. He had a great time down there, as he did in Dublin. So a live event, they probably got nailed down. They just need to work on fans that are watching on TV.
Absolutely. Now let's talk UFC Boston. And we've actually got a really saucy card coming up this weekend. A main event that's excited me a little bit. Dominic Reyes, Chris Weidman. Chris Weidman looked absolutely incredible on that meteoric rise he had at middleweight. He beat Anderson Silva when Anderson Silva was impossible to beat, then went and did it again, had a good little run, and then things just went crumbling down against Luke Rockhold. And then even worse against Yoel Romero, even worse against Gegard Mousasi. He got that win against Kelvin Gastelum, and then he was cleaned out by Jacare Souza. He seems to be winning these fights up until the bitter end, and suddenly he gets hit by either a flying knee or a huge right hand. Something just goes wrong for Chris. He's up at light heavyweight now. I'm hoping he can get a victory over Dominic Reyes, who's a good fighter. I felt he lost the Volkan Ozdemir fight, so I don't feel he's undefeated. But the winner of this fight, outside of the Corey Anderson-Johnny Walker fight, I mean, they're looking at a title shot.
Definitely, and Chris Weidman's actually, he seems quite a nice guy, and, you know, that flying knee was at UFC 205.
Romero.
Yeah, that was that was actually my first event watching. I remember seeing that knee and him on the canvas. You know, that was a brutal one to watch, and so was Jacare. He was going into that last round, winning the fight, and he only had, a minute or two left on the clock. And I don't know what it is for him, whether it's a mental block for him, especially in New York. He's been knocked out 3 times, or definitely lost 3 times, knocked out twice in New York.
I mean, could you imagine losing constantly in your own backyard? Imagine going to your local, Mitch, and getting cleaned up every single week. Be a nightmare, wouldn't it? You want to win. You want to win your local at least, mate.
Definitely. He's got
could you lose I mean, you're from down south, aren't
Yeah,
you?
definitely.
Could you imagine going to your Weatherspoons down south and getting cleaned up? I mean, that's why you moved up to Manchester, because you're getting beaten up every single week.
Average weekend from some parts where I'm from. But yeah, that would not be nice. And he is a good guy, and I'm hoping he does something, because I don't know what he does against John Jones, but that is a fight that for the fans is fun to see. And if he beats Dominic Reyes, he's probably in the driving seat, other than maybe Johnny Walker, should he beat Corey Anderson.
Yeah, I think Johnny Walker will probably get it, obviously, if he beats Corey. I think if Johnny loses and Corey wins, then I think Wyman probably gets the shot, because you need somebody for John Jones that has a bit of a name, and Chris has got that. So he's always going to be in and around the hunt. But let's talk about the co-main event. Jeremy Stephens, Yair Rodriguez, promised to be such a good fight last time round. It ended after, 15 seconds? An eye poke from Yair Rodriguez. Let's talk a little bit what came post-fight. Yair, obviously, seething, started on Michael Bisping.
Yeah, he almost hit Michael Bisping, which would not have been a great idea for him. I don't think he'd stand too much.
He called him. Do you know what? He said something. He mumbled something in Spanish, actually, Michael Bisping. Do you want me to give you the definition of what he said? He called Michael Bisping a blinking male prostitute.
I mean, he's only got one eye, so is that blinking or winking?
I mean, Michael Bisping was speaking about it on the podcast, and I think he was absolutely fine being called a male prostitute, but he was offended by the whole blinking insult.
I can imagine that wasn't one. Now, I know Rodriguez was seething after that fight. He thought he should have won that. Now, he's put all that camp into that fight. As to Jeremy Stephens, I don't think it was Stephens' sort of plan to get poked in the eye within the first 10 seconds and call the fight off. Now, something that is interesting, it's gone from a 5-round fight to a 3-round fight. So the tempo's probably picked up a little bit more. Jeremy Stephens has got a hard hit in him. So is 2 rounds less going to be any more of the benefit for it? Either one of them.
I felt that 5 rounds would have been better for Jeremy Stephens, because I know he's the grittier operator. He carries that power late. Over 3, can Yair just dance around him? It's got to be interesting. But because there's so much heat this time around, and only kicked off in the hotel the day after, are they just going to fly at each other? I'm hoping for an explosive one.
It could be an interesting one, and Yair Rodriguez needs 1 second to get that knockout. We saw it against the Korean Zombie with that upwards elbow, and that was a phenomenal knockout for him. I think it won knockout of the year, and it's going to be interesting to see what happens. Now, I'm backing probably Jeremy Stephens to this one, just slightly. It's going to be a great fight, but I think Stephens just has it. Although he's not exactly on the way up at the moment. He's sort of stagnating in that division.
No, you're absolutely right. Jeremy Stephens doesn't look like he's moving any way closer to a title shot. And I know that Yair Rodriguez always looked like he was going to hit superstardom, but he hasn't. I know he was losing that Korean Zombie fight up until the last few moments when he sort of floundered that elbow. Was it lucky or was it just a terrific shot? Only he knows for sure. But Jeremy Stephens, I edged towards him in the first fight. I'm going to edge towards him again, but it's one of them. It could go either way, Mitch. Now, I don't know if we have any topics left. We've absolutely exhausted everything.
Definitely.
We went through the WWE with Brock Lesnar just very, very quickly, because it's the boxing world. Tyson Fury as well. Yeah. He turned up on Monday Night Raw, scrapping with Braun Strowman. In the middle of the ring, calling Braun a dosser. He came to Raw, demanding an apology. The two were kicking off at each other. No security guard could hold the two men back. People say Tyson doesn't have a knockout punch. Did you see what he was doing to those security guards?
Knocked about 15 people, didn't he?
Oh, they were falling like dominoes, Mitch. Tyson Fury, Braun Strowman. Do you think he could be a superstar in WWE? Of course, they're going to be shelling that top billing at Crown Jewel with Brock and Kane.
It's absolutely ludicrous that we've got Braun Strowman versus Tyson Fury before we've got Tyson Fury versus either Anthony Joshua or Wilder 2. That's absolutely ridiculous. But for a profile for him, it's probably a good move for him. It's going to get a lot of eyes on him. He's very funny, he's very humorous, and he's coming into this as probably the bad guy.
Yeah, absolutely. Tyson Fury is always the bad guy, isn't he? The Gypsy King. But I love Tyson. You call it script, but I'll be supporting Tyson on the night regardless. And I think in terms of that eye injury that he sustained, obviously WWE has its own dangers, but getting punched in the face is likely going to cause more. And that cut opened up so badly that it needs time to heal. I think Tyson needs a bit of time away from the boxing ring to let his body recover, because of course he still lost all that weight and he's never really left camp. He had 2 fights back-to-back, Tom Schwartz and then Otto Wallen. So he needs that recovery time. Let his body just recover, let that eye recover, then get back into the boxing game. He's been boxing all his life. The skill factor is with him over Deontay Wilder a million times over. So a bit of a break. Hopefully that fight doesn't happen in February. I would like it to come maybe April, May next year. And you never know, Wilder could get caught or hurt in the Ortiz fight. You never know what's going to happen there.
Thinking about that as well, another event that's in Saudi Arabia is Anthony Joshua Ruiz. Now, if Anthony Joshua beats Ruiz, gets those belts back, Wilder's probably next on his list. Wilder's got Ortiz, so both of them have got fights booked. So for Tyson Fury, there wasn't a fight that was that big and that more attractive. So WWE is probably a much more attractive sort of income for him to build his brand across globally as well, because they're in Saudi Arabia for this event. It's not like it's an event in America. It's not a WrestleMania that's in a stadium. And I know WWE's got a live event in Manchester a couple of weeks after that, I believe. So that would be interesting to see whether he shows up there and really brings in that Mancunian crowd.
Absolutely. I can imagine he will. Tyson's a big draw. And as you just mentioned there on Saudi Arabia, just before we close the show, I'll touch on how interesting that division is now. So Andy Ruiz, Anthony Joshua will fight for those 3 belts, the WBO, the IBF, and the WBA. Mm-hmm. As soon as one of them wins that, they will have 2 mandatories enforced immediately. So the WBO will say Alexander Usyk, the IBF will say Kubrat Pulev. Whoever wins is going to have to pick one of those 2 men to fight and vacate the other belt. Either Pulev or Usyk will be fighting for a vacant belt. So there is going to be another heavyweight world champion. I rate Pulev highly, but I think Usyk is the better of the 2. And who's number 2 in those WBO rankings? It's Tyson Fury. If the Wilder fight falls through, we could be looking at Usyk versus Fury for the WBO, and after that, Usyk versus Parker for the WBO. So it's such a strong division at the moment. There's so many big names, and boxing, at least in the heavyweight division, is in a bit of an interesting place.
Saying that, we just had Parker was meant to fight Chisora, was it? And Chisora,
Spider Bite.
He's now got David Price, so that's going to be interesting. I think Chisora cleans David Price out.
Yeah, I mean, David Price looked as good as he ever did against Dave Allen, and although Dave Allen was a good win, it's not the standout win in a career that a bronze medalist at the Olympic Games should have. David Price, if he turns up at his very best and he punches extremely hard, he could clean Chisora out, but I would agree that Chisora has to go in a favourite. The
only difference is probably the height, and that's, it's an extreme height difference between both of them, but Chisora's probably got the power. Now, whether the range from Price can do any damage, I'm not sure. It'd be an interesting one, but I think Chisora definitely is that one. And of course, we've got Dillian Whyte in the mix as well at some point.
Absolutely. I mean, he obviously failed a drugs test. He's still saying that he didn't. I mean, he was cleared by the board, wasn't he? Eddie Hearn kept it all quiet. They didn't tell the Rivas team, which is dodgy in itself. But there is a case being made. Why was Dillian Whyte cleared? Was it financial?
Potentially.
Or was it because there was a reason he was cleared? And Joseph Parker presumably is on something now because he's got a bit of spider venom in his blood and will turn up looking like Peter Parker for his next fight. But I think that's all we've got time for on today's edition of Split Decision. Tune in next week. We're going to be talking all things Weidman versus Reyes. And, of course, previewing the big one. Ben Askren is back against Damian Maia coming off that loss. We're going to have Harry Williams in as well. Finally, we're going to do an episode of Tap Out. It's been far too long, Mitch. I've been promising it week in, week out, but we're actually going to get it done. Of course, in the coming weeks, we're going to be talking all about that Crown Jewel pay-per-view. Brock Lesnar, Cain Velasquez, Tyson Fury, Braun Strowman, and then Madison Square Garden, the baddest motherfucker, Nate Diaz versus Jorge Masvidal, Darren Till versus Kelvin Gastelum, and of course, Steve's going to be on the channel with Brendan, talking all things fighting out of Manchester. There's so much coming up over the next few weeks. Make sure you like, make sure you hit that notification bell, make sure you subscribe. There's so much coming out. Split Decision, James Sweetnam and Mitch Ivy. We'll see you next time.